Hey everyone, today we're going to talk about the utilities section and the mixer section. This patch that I have set up uses the utility section to create a sort of ring modulated sound. And you can control it using the mod wheel. I'm going to show you exactly what I've done to set this patch up in a second. If you want patch notes and diagrams like this one, I have a whole book of them up on my Patreon page right now, and I'm going to be adding to it periodically. I try to include patches like this so they can be used as learning tools, so you can learn specific methods or things like that, so that way you can apply them to your own patches. But really, the patch books are just a way for me to thank my Patreon members for signing up. This channel wouldn't be possible without their support, and I'd love it if you checked it out and joined. Either way, make sure you like and subscribe. I'm going to take apart this patch, explain the utilities section, and then we'll come back to it at the end and I'll explain everything that's going on. Okay, so let's go over our utilities. They're located right here. We're also going to talk about the mixer section. So first of all, right at the top, we have our multiples. What this does is you can plug in any type of control voltage in here, like an LFO, and it multiplies it 3 times and you can take them out. These are unbuffered mults. The difference between buffered and unbuffered, I mean, really it's that it takes power. Unbuffered is the same as passive, but that means that there might be some slight variances in the signal that comes out. This doesn't matter for things like LFOs because really, I mean, unless you're doing something really specific that you want an exact voltage with your LFO, you're not going to notice a huge difference. You would want to use a buffered mult in the case if you were sending like a control voltage that's going to go into an oscillator where you need volts per octave, because it has to be very specific. If you plugged it in here and then took 3 versions of it out, there might be subtle variances in them, and then the oscillators might sound out of tune. So it's just something to keep in mind, but realistically, unbuffered passive mults are good for just about anything you want to use them for. I wouldn't patch them from here. That's the volts per octave from the sequencer. We have 3 attenuators right here, here, and here. You can input here, output here, and control them using CV. If an LFO is moving a full range of, say, plus 5 volts all the way down to negative 5 volts, that would be at max level. And if you turned it about halfway between 0 and max, it would only go up 2.5 volts and down 2.5 volts. So it makes it less dramatic. If you bring it in the negative section, it will actually flip the LFO. Now these 3 attenuators can act independently, but these 2 are also connected. And if you plug in an LFO, let's say from here to here, if you don't take anything out of this, then the voltage that's coming in here will be passed down to the second one. So for instance, if I take this, just to demonstrate it, let's plug it into the cutoff. So you can create some more complex shapes. Let's take the sample and hold out and plug that into this attenuator. So now what we're going to get is a mix of the LFO being attenuated here and the sample and hold being attenuated here. Let's take this LFO, which is moving at a much faster rate, and plug it in here. So now we'll have a much more complex signal going to our cutoff. It's just a great way to mix control voltages together and get a much more complex signal. Let's talk quickly about the mixer section. This is where we can control all of the levels of the 4 oscillators and the noise going into our output. The levels can all be controlled independently, as well as the noise. You can also replace any of these voices with a separate voice. Say if you were using your Eurorack setup and you wanted to use this mixer as a separate module, you could just plug into the inputs here and it would remove whatever source you plugged into. And the last thing I want to point out with the mixer section is that generally speaking, I leave things at 12 o'clock if I want a clean tone. Once you push it into the upper ranges, it starts to get a little overdriven, which actually sounds really, really great if that's what you're looking for. So just be aware that when you turn things all the way up, that will sound really overdriven. It has a nice warmth and saturation to it, so don't avoid it. Just make sure that you're conscious and aware of it. All right, so those are the utilities in the mixer. Let's head back to the patch that I was playing at the beginning and show how I was using some of these. Okay, so this is the patch I had at the very beginning of the video, and what I've done is created some ring modulation as an effect that's controllable through the mod wheel. So let's start with that CV control. I have it coming out of the mod wheel output in the back and going into this attenuator. I'll explain why I'm using the attenuator in just a second, but after it passes through the attenuator, it's using this yellow patch point, it's going into my mult. And then I'm sending that control voltage into 2 places, into the pitch of oscillator 2 and the pitch of oscillator 4. Now I also have the sync enabled, which locks these pitches to the pitches before it. So for instance, this one is locked into this pitch. And this one is locked into pitch 3. And that's why I'm able to change the pitch of the second oscillator without it actually impacting the pitch. If I didn't have the sync enabled, you would hear that the keyboard mod, you would hear that the mod wheel would actually change the pitch of oscillator 2. Also, right here on oscillator 3, I have a dead patch. That means that it's patched in with, and it's not going anywhere. And the reason that I did that was because when you enter something in here, it will go down the line. So for instance, if I take it out and I'm going to turn everything down but oscillator 3, it's still impacted because this is normaled to change the pitch all the way down. If you plug it in, that breaks that hardwire and it's no longer affected. So this locks the pitch of this in here, although I'm using this pitch and it creates that weird ring modulation sound. This is also locked into number 3, and then those are set in paraphony mode 1. So if I turn them all up, now the reason I have the attenuator here, and because I mean essentially a mod wheel can function just as an attenuator, but I wanted the full force of the mod wheel only to go up to about this level. If I turned it up way high, that was a little bit too much for what I wanted, so that felt a little bit better. If you wanted a steady stream of ring modulation, you could also disconnect this and use something else, like an LFO. You could also, rather than patching, just use this pitch amount right here and assign it to 2 and 4. Let's hear what that sounds like. But if you wanted to control it through the mod wheel as I did, you do have to actually patch it up and do it manually. So anyways, that's the patch. I hope you liked it. I hope you think about joining my Patreon page. I'd really appreciate it. Let me know what you think in the comments section. In the next video, I'm going to talk about the paraphony modes, and we'll just go through those just to keep everything complete. We've talked about them a lot throughout the series, but I think it makes sense to have a whole video on them. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.